Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
All right, everybody, now it's time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, and let's welcome Alonzo.
Hi, my name's Alonzo, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm honored to be here and to get to speak at this meeting or any other meeting for that matter. I thank Jill personally. I want to thank you publicly for sharing. And I was laughing when you talked about being a PhD and speaking in front of a group of students, because I'm a comic and I speak in front of groups of drunks. And if I tell them I'm an alcoholic, they just fucking laugh, you know. So it's just it's kind of cool, you know, the shared experience around here. Excuse me. I've been asked to speak a lot at meetings lately. You know how that is. Like you speak at one, and then they ask you to speak at another and another. So I've been thinking about my story, and a lot of obviously. A lot of gratitude has come up, and just thinking about a lot of things from when I was new and so on, and how much my life has changed since I've been here. I've been sober for 18 years. So a friend of mine describes it as middle management. You know, it's that area between 10 years, which is big, and 20 years, which is where you're an old timer. And he's like, we're in those years that you just go. You're just sober. And that's the way it is. And my sobriety is it's just part of my life. It's kind of hard to explain. It has become my norm, you know. And by that I don't mean that I think I'm normal or that I'm immune to drinking and using or anything else. It just means that I've been sober long enough that it's ingrained in me, and it kicks in even when I'm not thinking about it, you know. My story as far as drinking and using, I have nothing special. I have nothing spectacular to bring to you. I started getting loaded when I was about 13 because that's what the older guys did, and it was cool. And as a friend of mine says, I had to relieve the ordinary everyday pressures of a 13-year-old, you know. I believe personally that I was an alcoholic and addict from the start because I loved getting loaded alone. That was my thing, even right from the beginning. I mean, back in those days, you know, you get together with a couple of friends and each of you have a couple of bucks and you get some beer and some weed or whatever, but I would always try to have my own stash for the end of the night. So my favorite part of the day when I would unwind was walking the dog at night, you know, because I'd have a joint and a beer. And that was what I really looked forward to. And when I was 15, that was what I considered my first perfect year, because I got high every day that year. And it got to the point where, like, I realized it a couple of months in, and I was like, I got to keep the streak going. You know, I don't want to miss any days now. You know, because if I missed a day, I would have started over. But, you know, it was like that's where my head was at that time. And you know something? It was great. It worked. It worked. I had no problems. I grew up in New York, and I went to this specialized high school called Aviation High School, and besides the normal high school curriculum, they also trained us to be airplane mechanics. And at the time, it was a difficult school to get into, and the curriculum was difficult for a lot of people, not so much for me. And I knew when to get high and when not to. You know, it was like, see, the ordinary classes, the math, the English, the science, and stuff like that, that stuff was easy for me. You know, and I can remember a teacher saying, you know, if you like applied yourself, you could do excellent in these classes. And my attitude was like, yeah, but I could just not try at all and still pass. you know, and that was my attitude, and that's what I did. But when it came to the shop program, learning to be a mechanic, that's what I considered important, so I would excel at that. So I would never be loaded during shop class, but I could be loaded during regular classes. That was just the way my mind worked. And I had a friend who, he said to me, he said, man, you got to stop getting loaded, man. You're going to mess up and this and that. And when we graduated, I looked at the rank, and I was number 60 out of 600 and something, and he was like number 400 and something. And I was like, man, you should have started getting loaded when I did. You might have brought your average up. And I tell that story because that was my attitude. You know, it was like, look, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't hurt me. My attitude was always, what do you want me to do? And I'll live up to your requirements so that you'll leave me alone. You know, and my parents were really cool because they had two basic requirements. They said, get good grades in school and don't go to jail. And I was like, that leaves a lot of room for shit I want to do in between. You know, and I graduated from high school, and I moved to LA. I got a job. Lockheed, which used to be in Burbank, hired me, so I moved out here, and that was in 1980. And my using was right along the cocaine timeline. Now, I know this is an AA meeting, and my alcohol use was a constant. I always drank. It was always the background thing, but drugs were my main thing. And I started doing blow in the early 80s when it was not addicting. And if you're around, you know they told us it's not addicting. They wrote about it in Time magazine. It's not addicting. I was like, cool, I can handle that. And I got sober in the late 80s when rehabs were booming. You know, there was like a rehab on every corner, and they felt sorry for addicts and alcoholics, and they'd help us out. And I walked right in at that time, you know. What happened in between was, like I said, I came out here in 1980. Lockheed didn't just hire me. They hired a few hundred guys from my high school. So if you can imagine and I went to an all-boys school, by the way, which meant there's a certain, I don't know, camaraderie when guys are together just with men. We don't behave the same as we do when we're around you ladies. I know that may come as a shock to you, but you know. So anyway, when they brought us out here, it was like, okay, now the party's really gonna start. Because now we got money, we got a good job, and I started getting all the stuff. I got the apartment and the cars and the motorcycles and the toys, and I was having a ball. I had a great job. I was young. I had no responsibilities. I had no problems. I was having fun. I was drinking and using. It was working. I hadn't, you know, and again, when I say I hadn't crossed the line, I don't mean I wasn't an alcoholic or an addict. I mean I hadn't crossed the line to where it was damaging. You know, and what happened was after about 2 years, I decided I needed her. You know, that was the last thing I needed. Once I find her, everything will be complete. And I met this girl, and it looked like her. You know, and you know, it felt like her, smelled, tasted like her, and really wasn't her. You know, but in retrospect, not even close to being her. But at the time, it was great. And again, I've learned a lot in sobriety, okay? And the relationship I had with her, I have learned was the typical alcoholic relationship. She actually came to my building to visit some other guy who lived in the building, and then we ended up hanging out, and by the end of the month, we lived together, you know? And after a few months, something went wrong. And that was a new experience to me. See, I had lived what I describe as a charmed life. When I was in high school, like I said, I did great in school. I had a great job. I worked at a catering place that did like weddings and dinner dances, which was great because I could drink for free after work. Like we would just walk off the job with pitchers of beer and party. I made great money. I had to work weekends, you know, so I didn't go out to clubs and stuff. I just went to work. And that was good. Then Lockheed was good. Then I got laid off, and that scared me because I hadn't been out of work since I was 15. And it took me about a week, maybe 2 weeks to get another job because I was young and I was trained and I had experience. And once that happened, losing a job was no longer a problem. You know, I knew, okay, I ain't got to worry about losing a job. There's jobs waiting all over the place, you know. And I took a job in Santa Barbara, oddly enough, and I would work up there during the week, and I would come back on weekends. And I came back one weekend right before Christmas, and she was gone. you know, and when I literally came home to carpet. Like, when she was gone, she took everything. Now I laugh about it. It was like, geez, how do you pack all this stuff? You know, there weren't hangers left in the closet. I mean, like, everything was gone, you know, but at the time, the thing was, it was devastating. It was an emotional pain. Now, that was something I never dealt with. I never had to deal with. I had never felt it. I didn't know what to do. But all I knew was getting loaded made the pain go away. And that was when any rule I had about not getting loaded, like, you know, I'm not going to get loaded at work, or I'm not going to get loaded in the morning, or whatever else, all those rules went right out the window. Because that's when it became about staying loaded so I wouldn't feel, you know, and that's what I did. And let me clear this up, because my first sponsor told me I always have to clear this up when I share so I don't scare people. Yes, I was an airplane mechanic when I was doing this. Yes, I worked on planes loaded, but not everyone working on the plane was loaded. And nothing I worked on ever came down, you know, and it's really funny. My home group is a men's stag meeting, and we realized at that meeting we have the airplane mechanic, we have the airplane pilot, and we have a flight controller from the airport. So we were like, you know, if you flew in the 80s, boy, you really trusted us, didn't you? But anyway, now I fly every week, and I don't worry about it, and I'm not scared, and, you know, so take that for what it is. Anyway, I did it, you know, and I was really good at my job, and this is something else I learned in sobriety. I was good in my job because somewhere in my brain, I knew that this was how I would use. Like, I knew I needed the job and I needed the money to get loaded. So I couldn't lose the job, therefore I had to be good at it. And I led a double life, you know, and it's always funny to me when people talk about lying and they say, like, you know, you shouldn't lie to people because you'll forget what lie you told. And it's like, well, you obviously haven't dealt with alcoholics, you know, because I remembered every lie I told. I remember who I told what lie to. I didn't confuse them. I knew what I told you and what I told you and what I told you, because that's how I lived. That was part of my survival mechanism. So at work, I was really good. I was like a golden boy. You know, I got into this thing of, and it was perfect for me. I was doing geographics. And if you don't know what that means, it means moving around, changing your life, trying to escape from yourself. That's what I was trying to do. So I was moving around the country doing different jobs. I used to do these major aircraft repairs when airplanes would have, we call it a hard landing. You know, you guys call it a crash, but you've never been trained. You're not professionals. Airplane, they have accidents on the ground now and then, and somebody has to fix the plane. And I was part of the crew that fixed the plane. Now, it was a great job for me because the company would pay to fly us to where, you know, wherever it was. They paid our hotel and our bills. All we had to do was work. We were paid well, and we got loaded. We worked during the day, and we got loaded all night, and that's what we did. And they didn't, I think they kind of turned a blind eye to it because we were willing to work 12, 15 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week to get the plane out, and that's all they cared about, getting the plane done. And we were good at what we did. So anyway, so I started doing this and moving around the country, and I lived like that for a couple of years. And again, it was great while it worked. You know, for a while it worked. I went to Santa Barbara, then I went to New York, then I went to Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico was just amazing. You know, when people, you know, another thing I hear in meetings is like, oh, my my worst day sober was better than my best day using. Not me. It was working in Puerto Rico. You know, me and my roommate, we had a 2-bedroom condo on the beach. And I was a lead. Besides handling the work stuff, I handled the payroll for everybody. So like I had to literally cash my crew's paychecks and then hand out the money. Now I'm also selling them cocaine, and the way that worked was because you know, we went to Puerto Rico, right? And it was really funny. When I get there, they had a map on the wall, and they had like red places marked out. You know, like stay out of these areas. These areas are dangerous. And I'm thinking like, boy, you just saved me a lot of trouble. and it, you know, and they're like, oh, you know, there are Puerto Ricans around. I'm from New York. I'm used to Puerto Ricans. I'm not scared of Puerto Ricans. So right away, I went out and made a cocaine connection, right? And I would get the powder. Now my roommate he knew how to cook it, and he had a pipe, right? So what we would do is I would sell you the powder, right? And then you had to give it back to us so he could cook it, at which time we cut off a piece, and then we rented the pipe by the hour because, we had the only one. It was the only time I was really making money selling cocaine. Because usually I was my best customer and didn't make a dime. And we did this, and I never want to forget this, because we did have a lot of good times. We had a lot of great times. But one of the things we used to do was we would throw rocks on the floor to watch people look for them. Because again, very entertaining when you're the one throwing the rocks, And so we finished up the job in Puerto Rico. I loved it so much I wanted to stay, but I couldn't because I couldn't speak Spanish. So we went to the next job, which was in Oakland, doing the same kind of thing, working, having fun, doing whatever. And then the company hired me to stay, and all of my boys left. And, when that happened, it was like maybe a month later that I was on the floor looking for that piece, and I never want to forget that, because for me, that's the progression. You see, it never went back. It got worse, So I stayed in Oakland for I don't know, almost a year, and then I got laid off, and then I had a job in Dallas, and I went to Dallas, and the same pattern followed, but this time it was shorter. Instead of a year, it was like 4 months, and that's where I hit my first bottom, and I was stuck. I had been laid off from my job, and I was in an apartment, and the power was cut off, and et cetera, and I called my mother, and I told her I needed help. And she asked me, did I want to go to New York or LA? And I said, I want to go to LA because I consider this home. And she wired me the money for a plane ticket. And the same day, this guy called, and a friend of mine said he was driving across country and I could throw my stuff in the truck for free and ride as long as I help him drive. Now, as soon as I hung up the phone, I didn't have a problem anymore, And the money my mother sent me, I just went and got loaded. He came, we came back to LA. I went back to Lockheed, got my old job back, started the process again. Shorter time. Now in about 3 months, 3.5 months, I was going to get fired. Now I'd never been fired. I always got lucky and got laid off, which meant my record stayed clean. I was going to get fired for missing work because Lockheed paid on Thursdays. You can't pay an addict and alcoholic on Thursday if you expect to see him on Friday. I would not show up for work on Fridays, and I was going to get fired. So there was a thing, it was like a scam to us. They had a drug and alcohol rehab thing at the job. You go in there, you tell them you have a problem, they send you to a 30-day either inpatient or outpatient. You go back to work, it was a medical leave. You can do that 3 times before you actually got fired. And that was my plan. And I went there and I lasted like 2 weeks. And then the holidays came and I was like, I don't have to stay sober, it's Christmas. We're off, And they were like, yeah, And so I got into this big fight, big argument with them, whatever, and I started getting loaded again. And then a few months later, I got laid off, didn't get fired, and was ready to continue my pattern, and I got busted. And that was something that had never happened to me. I'd been amazingly lucky, never got busted, never any trouble with the law. And when they put me in the back of the police car with the handcuffs on, the only thing I remembered was that word powerless. I remember you guys telling me I was powerless, and I did not believe it. I did not understand the concept. When I was getting loaded, I used to work out then. I was a pretty big guy. I lived in like the Studio City, Sherman Oaks area. If you're a large black man in the Studio City, Sherman Oaks area, you're not really powerless. People actually cross the street as you walk up, and intimidation was my tool. So you told me I was powerless. I was like, no, I'm not. I can make people do shit, And what happened was, with the cuffs on in the police car, I knew exactly what you meant. Because now my life had nothing to do with me. It had nothing. Whatever was going to happen next was totally out of my hands, et cetera, et cetera. I got out of jail the next day. I got drunk because I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. And then the following day, I talked my way back into the rehab. And the difference was now I wanted to stay sober. I was willing. And that's been a constant throughout my sobriety. I've been willing. Sometimes it's 51% willing and 49%, go out, do whatever. But I've always had the willingness and wanted to stay sober. And so I went to the outpatient place, and a panel came in.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And there was this woman on the panel, and she was beautiful. She was just stunning, you know, and she said she was from New York, and then she rambled on about sobriety or something. I didn't hear another word after that, because I had my plan, you know, because I had weeks of sobriety, so obviously I was what she's been dreaming about. And after the panel, I went right up to her, and it was funny because she knew exactly what I was thinking. And she said, look, I'm married, but there are a lot of women like me that go to a place called Studio 12. So Studio 12 immediately became my home group. And, you know, I was like, I'll meet you there. And I went there, and she introduced me to this guy and said, he's going to be your sponsor. And she walked off. And I didn't see her again for 3 years, you know. But now I had a sponsor. And it didn't, you know, me and him, it didn't work because we had different shifts at work. So I got another guy to be my sponsor, and he introduced me to the steps. And he took me through the steps, and it was an amazing process. Because when I started coming to meetings, the first thing I realized was I wasn't the only one. That, you know, because I loved getting loaded alone, I always thought I was the only one. No one gets loaded like I do. And I came to meetings and I heard you guys share, and I realized I wasn't the only one. I finally felt like, okay, I don't know if I can say I felt I fit in, but I knew there was something going on there. And they told me to read the book, and I love to read. I read the book in like 4 days, and that blew my mind, because my overriding thought was, how did 2 white guys 50 years ago know exactly how I feel? I didn't, you know, so I knew there was something going on there. And I used to hear things at meetings, and it would blow my mind, you know, because it rang so true with me. You know, like I remember hearing a guy talking about, you know, an alcoholic can wake up and it's a beautiful day and the sun is shining and the birds are singing. You open your eyes and your first thought is, I'm doomed. And I was like, yeah, I get that, you know. And there was a guy named Jay who used to be at Studio 12, and Jay, he was an amazing guy. He was one of the guys who was absolutely instrumental in my early sobriety. And I remember him saying that, you know, when the bills used to come to his house, he had a big red rubber stamp, and he would stamp the envelope deceased and put it back in the mailbox. And I was thinking, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? And my sponsor was like, if you think that's brilliant, then you're in the right place. You belong here, you know. And what they did when I was new, they told me to sit down, shut up, and listen. They told me right off that I didn't know a damn thing about sobriety, that they didn't want to hear anything I had to say. And they told me I would do what they said. And when I say they, I meant my sponsor and the guys, like his friends were all in that, at the time, 3 to 5 year group, and my friends were all in the, like, I don't know, newcomer, you know, that's what we were called, the newcomers. And so they would sponsor us, and it was a weird kind of relationship because my sponsor was nice to me, but he would pick on all of my friends. And their sponsors were nice to them, but they would pick on us. So it was a weird kind of thing going on that, you know, one guy be, oh man, it's great, you're sober another day, and then another guy be, listen, you stupid newcomer, sit your ass down. And yeah, I don't know what to do. Well, then sit your ass down, okay, you know, and but it was exactly what I needed. See, the gentle welcome wouldn't have worked with me. You know, like I said, I was intimidating when I was out there, and I would use that. And they introduced me to guys who had been in prison and on death row. Now, although I may be intimidating in the valley, you know, once you've been to prison, you win, I'll do what you say, you know, and it took away that tool. And the other thing they did, because I was angry a lot of times, and this guy told me, of course you're angry, we took your toys away. You know, and I would come into a meeting, and I'd always come in a few minutes late, and I would stand in the back of the room and be angry. That's what I did. And they laughed at me until I could laugh at myself. Jay would stop a meeting and give me a round of applause for coming in. And you know, anything that, it just was funny to them, and it was funny until I had to laugh at it. Now, I'm going to tell you something about Jay, which has to do with how this disease is and what happens. You know, Jay was a fixture at Studio 12. He probably helped countless people because he was always there, you know, greeting people, welcoming them, talking to newcomers, this and that. And Jay went out, you know, and when he went out, he ended up dying in a murder-suicide. He killed the person he was using with and then killed himself. And I don't say that to scare anybody or to shock anybody. I say that because that's the reality of what we do. That's where, you know, drugs and alcohol go. That's where I could go. I'm aware of that, and it really hurt to lose him. But I also understood that he's an addict and an alcoholic, and it's what we do. And unfortunately, a lot of times we take someone with us, or we take people around us with us, and it's part of the disease and part of the behavior that goes with it, and I have to be aware of that. So anyway, now I'm at a point in my sobriety where, you know, I'm putting my life back together. I'm doing things. I'm going through the steps with my sponsor. When I did my 4th and 5th step, you know, those get all the press. You know, everyone always talks about, oh, the 4th step. Oh, you know, if you're new here, you might have been here a week. You're probably already scared of the 4th step, and it's not that big a deal. They said, you know what? Once you do one, you've done it. And when I heard that, I was like, okay. And I did my 4th step, and I did my 5th step with my sponsor, and it was probably the first time I was completely honest with somebody. And there wasn't any white light experience, there wasn't any great thing other than I learned I could be honest with somebody. And there were no repercussions. And he told me stuff about him, and it was one more time like, okay, I'm not the only one. You know, and then on my first birthday, I got the letter from the IRS. And if you're new here and you haven't got the letter, you will. It's the one amends, you never have to look for them. They'll be in touch. And it said I owed them $15,000, and I was in a panic. I didn't know what to do. And my sponsor was laughing his ass off. And I'm like, you know, once again, what the hell are you laughing at? You know, and he's like, when I got sober, I owed him 80 grand. So I figured, okay, if you made enough money to owe him 80 grand, you could easily loan me 15. And we can clear this whole thing up. At which point he explained to me that's not how it worked, and introduced me to outside experts such as accountants, and I did the back taxes, and it turned out at that point that they actually owed me money because I had been paying taxes, I just hadn't been filing returns. But the IRS doesn't really have a sense of humor about that sort of thing. I think somebody took it personal because since then, in my sobriety, I've had 3 major IRS problems. You know, where I owed them a bunch of money and I had to make the payment plan. And I go to meetings and people would talk about these offers and compromise. You know, I owed them $10,000 and I only had to pay them $2,000. Well, I guess the IRS has an incredible confidence in my earning ability because they would never give me a dime off. They were just like, nope, you just pay us every month till it gets paid, you know, and then something would happen, I get a bunch of money and pay them, and I would do the exact same thing, and I'd be, oh shit, I owe them money again, and I go back and say, how about this time? They'd be like, no, we want it all, you're good for it, and I was like, damn, you know. So anyway, so that's my tax story, but I went, in other words, I went through all of this stuff that is part of new sobriety, cleaning life up, you know, through the personal amends and the financial amends and, you know, this and that. I didn't have a lot of personal amends to make because I didn't interact with a whole lot of people. The big one was writing a letter to my parents about, you know, and I was very vague about what exactly happened. I figured they didn't need to know. And my mother's only thing was she said, look, I don't understand any of this. I don't know what's with that AA thing. All I know is you're better than you were, so keep doing whatever you're doing. I don't have to worry about you anymore. And that was great. I'm very lucky in the family area. I have a great relationship with my family. My brother's sober. My brother's got, he'll be 18. His birthday is on New Year's Eve, but it's on the day, like the 31st. And I always say, you couldn't have held out one more night. But anyway, we have a great relationship because of that. My sister, I have nieces and nephews. I've been sober their whole life. That blows me away. It's the biggest gift I have in sobriety, and I have a lot of gifts. But these kids and the fact that I can be an uncle and I can spoil these kids, I can't even begin to describe how good that feels. You know, my nephew, when he was 7 and he started Little League, I was playing catch with him. And I was practically crying because at that moment I realized that you guys took an addict and an alcoholic and you made him a hero to a 7-year-old kid. You know, and I can't explain the gratitude in that feeling. You know, my niece is 17 now. And teenage girls fascinate me. I had no idea that everything was that important. You know, and I love her. It's hilarious, you know, but we have a great relationship. When she started high school, I told her my story, because that's when I started getting loaded, and I wanted to let her know you don't have to make the mistakes your uncle made. You know, and we talk a lot, and we talk about different things, and I went to visit her once at her school, and as I'm driving up, I hear her tell her friend, oh, that's my uncle and my best friend. You know, and once again, I have to stop because I can't cry in front of them. But that's what's going on. That's what I'm feeling. And you guys did that. I don't know how to do that. This program made me into that person. The other huge change in my life is when I had 5 years sober, I was teaching new airplane mechanics, and I could make them laugh, and I had fun doing it. And I said, I want to be a comic. And you guys said, you can do that. And I said, how? And you said, I have no idea. Not a clue, but you can do it, you know? And I ended up taking this comedy class, and I did my first show, and Terry, a friend who's here, who's known me since I came in, she was there, and she remembers it. And anyway, after I did the show, I walked off stage, and my friend Charles, who I knew, he was one of the guys who used to pick on me incessantly when I was new. We used to joke about Charles being so cool that when he walked in the room, the temperature dropped. You know, he works in wardrobe in the studios, and he was always impeccably dressed, and just, you know, one of those guys that when you're new, there are certain people you look up to, and Charles was one of those guys for me, you know. And one time he gave me a compliment, which was huge. He said I had on a nice sweater, and, you know, I'm like, whoa. And he said, you know, you're new, you probably picked it out by accident, but it looks good, you know. And so anyway, he was there, and he came over to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, well, it looks like we finally found out what God meant for you to do. And that was the exact feeling I had, you know. And when we tell you don't leave before the miracle happens, we mean it. There are miracles that happen around here. People do things and get things in this program that are beyond belief, just like you were sharing about. And I'll never forget, this woman said it one time, and she said it perfectly. She said that God's infinite gifts are not limited by my finite imagination, you know. And I started doing comedy, and my career in that has been, like today, I live a dream that I did not have when I got sober. I had no, it's not like I grew up wanting to do this or anything like that. This came about in sobriety. Today, my life is so full. I've had so many phenomenal experiences, and I laugh about it a lot of times. You know, I was doing military stuff for a while, and I'm performing at the U.S. Embassy in Oman for like the U.S. ambassador and all these, and I'm sitting there like, I'm a crackhead, you know. You know, but fortunately I had been sober long enough not to tell them that. But I get to have those kind of experiences, you know, and stuff, you know. I love stuff. I will be honest with you. There's a shallow materialistic side of me that will not go away. And my God knows it, and he's like, if we don't give Alonzo a new toy periodically, he's not pleasant to be around. You know, and my sponsor is the same way. My sponsor's a car guy, I'm a car and motorcycle guy. And it's okay, because I've learned in sobriety, it's not the most important thing, but it's nice. And if any spiritual giant ever tells you that material stuff doesn't matter, just say, give me your car right now. Just come on, walk like you talk, give me the car, and you'll find out that it's different, you know. So anyway, the reason I want to share about that is because it is part of my reality, I guess. And you know, one of the things when I got sober, I was like, I'm never going to have anything again. I have more now than I ever did, you know. And like I say, my sponsor's the same kind of guy. Now, when I was new, my sponsor, Daryl, was a Porsche guy. And he would show up to meetings with Porsches. And every year or two, he'd have a new one. And I was like, man, I really want a Porsche. And he looked at me, he's a little fat guy, and he said, I want to be tall and thin, but it don't always work out, you know. And when I had 9 years sober, I pulled up to a meeting in a Porsche, and he was there in a Ferrari, just to, you know, remind me of the pecking order. And then a couple of years after that, both of us were just having a real dry spell at work, you know. And he sold the Ferraris, and I sold the Porsche, and that's what I mean about the toys. They come and go. They're nice, but they are not the most important thing, you know. But it is part of my life. And my most recent experience with that is I bought a house about 1.5 years ago. I live out in Santa Clarita, and I have a beautiful house. It's a big, you know, new house in a suburb, subdivision, the whole thing. You guys know how that works and how it's laid out. And the thing was, I hated that house. You know, that's the alcoholic in me. I have a new house and I'm complaining about it. And it's hard to get people to listen to you complain about a new house. But I'm like, it's too far away, and this costs, and that, and the other, and it took me 6 months to like accept the fact that I live here. You know, that and my accountant explaining to me how capital gains taxes work and that I could not sell this house for 2 years. You know, that kicked it. I'll tell you, it was a program thing. When she said that, then I shifted from complaining about the problem to acceptance of the situation. And then things started being not so bad, you know, and now I'm cool with it. I like my house, you know, and that's what happens to me. See, I'm an alcoholic, so I can't trust my thinking, because I can be better than you and a piece of shit in the same thought. That, you know, and people in here are nodding because we know what that's like. Now, there are people out there who don't really understand that, you know, but that's why I like it in here, because you guys know how that feels. And the last thing I want to talk about, and I know I'm about out of time, but where I'm at in my sobriety now, it's about my emotional sobriety, because that's the one area I never worked on. And again, there are people in here who know me, who have known me for a while. I went through a relationship thing at 10 years of sobriety that I would not wish on anyone. You know, I was involved with 2 women at the same time in the same group who knew each other, and everyone knew us, and it was bad. There was a lot of pain all around, and this and that, and behavior terrible, and so on. And you know, what happened after that, Darryl, who is my sponsor today, I asked him to help me, and he said, I'm glad you asked, because you were on your way out. You know, and that's the truth. My behavior at that time would have led me out of the program. And I went through the steps one more time with the purpose of working on my emotional sobriety and growing up emotionally, and in that one area that I never touched. And I still work on that, and I'm doing okay today. You know, I'm doing okay. I'm better today. The situation resolved itself amazingly. You know, a woman who I hurt beyond belief actually forgave me, and she forgave me to the point that when she did get married and have a baby, she called me the day she had the baby to tell me about it. That's amazing, and I don't know how that happens, but it happened in here. And the other woman involved, we have a friendship now, and that, you know, I went through it, we got through it, and so on. And that's the area that I still work on, that I still need to grow in. I'm not done here by a long shot. You know, I still have a lot to work on, but I stay sober and I work on it. I love the women of this program, and I always like to acknowledge that. And I know I joke about it in the sexual and relationship manner, but it's the women in this program who taught me how to feel and made it okay for me to feel. I didn't know how to talk about that, and I didn't know how to talk to men about it, and the women were never intimidated by me, and they held me and they let me cry, and they explained to me feelings that I couldn't put into words. And I love the women of this program for doing that, and I have friends in here now who helped me through that period, and I'll always appreciate that. You know, if you're new here, take a chance on us. Hang out. It's the holidays. A lot of people trip out, call it the Bermuda Triangle. Between Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, people just disappear, you know. You can stay sober through the holidays. All you have to do is stay close. Watch how we stay sober through the holidays. Go to that Christmas party where you know absolutely no one, and no one likes you, and no one's going to talk to you or whatever, and watch how somehow you fit in. That kind of thing happens. Spend New Year's with us. Spend a New Year's sober. It's amazing. Remember, we're the people who shut the party down. We're the people who New Year's parties lasted well into February. So when we have a party New Year's and we're sober, don't think it's going to be some mild, quiet, tea-sipping affair. You know, we have a ball in sobriety. We have fun. Show up. If you don't know how to do it, that's fine. Just show up. You don't have any money, just show up. We'll let you in. You'll have a good time. You can stay sober through the holidays. This is a day-at-a-time program. A day at a time, I live a life beyond my belief. I've been given gifts I could never describe if I had 3-4 hours up here. I go through rough times just like anyone else, but I get through them sober. I've learned how to talk to people. I've learned, as one of the birthday people was sharing, to be honest. Take a chance and be honest with us and watch how much we can help you, because we're addicts and we're alcoholics and we know how you feel and we know what you think and we know what you've done. But what we know that you don't know yet is just how good it can be. Take a chance and let us show you. Thank you for letting me share.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.